When Halo Combat Evolved landed on the original Xbox in 2001, the video game industry changed dramatically. Master Chief and the UNSC's battle with the pious forces of the Covenant helped legitimize the first-person shooter on consoles, established Microsoft as a contender in the industry, and launched one of the most venerated sagas in the history of video games. As with any franchise that has lasted several decades, however, an abundance of failed concepts, pitches, and ideas are to be expected. Halo is no different. Yet its most notable failed projects are a diverse and eclectic bunch, wandering far outside the fine shooting and vehicle mechanics that the series' numbered entries exemplify. From a melee-focused action game to a Mega Bloks platformer teeming with gags, the history of Halo's canceled games and concepts embodies the franchise's versatility. It's easy to think that the road to Bungie's first foray into the Halo universe was a straightforward experience. Halo Combat Evolved's world is so grandiose and earnest in its execution that one would believe the game was spurred into existence by a strong, singular vision that changed little throughout the game's realization. In reality, Combat Evolved, like many other classic games, underwent many changes and revisions prior to its release, much more so than any future Halo title. Originally, Combat Evolved started out in 1997 as a completely different genre of game. Bungie was hard at work on a sequel to their real-time tactics game, Myth: The Fallen Lords, and wanted to try and see if they could take the series' guts and bolster its appeal with a sci-fi aesthetic. This project, first codenamed Armor, then Monkey Nuts, and finally Blam, resulted in a real-time strategy game similar to Myth, but with a fairly big differentiating factor: vehicles. Beyond highlighting the game's more futuristic setting, the vehicles, which resembled early versions of classic Halo transports, underscored the game's physics-heavy nature as they drove realistically over its uneven 3D terrain. Then one day, as Bungie legend goes, one of the project's programmers, Charlie Goff, decided to attach the game's camera to an early version of the Warthog. Driving directly alongside the bump and sway of the rough-and-tumble vehicle proved so popular that the decision was made to overhaul the project into a third-person action game around the end of 1998. From there, the project would undergo many more revisions on the road to its release and first-person perspective. While certain narrative elements such as the Halo rings, the Covenant, as well as the game's overall look and feel came together relatively early on, early versions of the ring featured an abundance of native fauna, with the player even able to tame and ride a dinosaur-like animal known as a blind wolf. A lack of time, performance issues, and a concern that their presence would diminish the surprise of the Flood led to them eventually being axed. Likewise, the challenges of game development would result in early ambitions of making Combat Evolved a dynamic, open world filled with far-reaching decisions, giving way to the more linear and segmented experience most are familiar with. And most famously, before even becoming the flagship title for Microsoft's Xbox, the game would originally be introduced by Steve Jobs as the future of gaming on Apple computers at Macworld 1999.
We are starting to see some great games come back to the Mac, but this is one of the coolest I've ever seen. This game is going to ship early next year from Bungie, and this is the first time anybody has ever seen it. It's the first time they've debuted it.
The subsequent success of both Halo Combat Evolved and Halo 2 would start turning the wheels on the ill-fated Halo movie. The film, which was to be directed by Neil Blomkamp and produced by Peter Jackson, would end up dead in the water in late 2006 as a result of a falling out between the film's creative executives and financial shareholders. However, amidst the movie's rise and subsequent fall, Peter Jackson was involved in another creative project within the Halo universe, Halo Chronicles. Announced at Microsoft's X06 trade show in 2006, Halo Chronicles was to be an episodic video game developed collaboratively by both Bungie and Jackson's new development studio, Wingnut Interactive. It was an exciting prospect, yet it was one that would ultimately prove unfulfilling, as years would pass without so much as a peep from either of the project's handlers. Not even a tagline escaped the game's Iron Curtain before its quiet cancellation in 2009, other than being described by Microsoft as a new chapter in the series and by Jackson as the filmiest game. Details as to what exactly Chronicles would have been like and why it was canceled would remain scarce until Waypoint Vice's Oral History of Halo in 2017, in which many of Halo's former designers would shed light on the project's nature. Apparently, Chronicles would have encapsulated the phrase, "be the bullet," with the game following a normal, underpowered Marine who would gradually transform into a Promethean, a primordial and mysterious alien species as a result of them obtaining an alien arm. The player would have fought enemies entirely using melee combat and two non-lethal weapons, one that would allow them to stun their enemies and another that would push them away. The player would have also had limited powers of flight, with the ability to perform long-distance dashes in the air early on, and eventually being able to transform into a missile and strike Covenant ships in low orbit once they had fully become a Promethean. Ultimately, expanding creative differences between Wingnut and Bungie, a lack of decisiveness on the game's story, and the Halo movie's cancellation resulted in Chronicles collapsing. However, elements of the game's content would find their way into several future projects. Halo 3 ODST, which was greenlit to fulfill a contractual obligation with Microsoft that Chronicles was supposed to satisfy, would inherit the latter game's Kung Fu system, whereby large groups of enemies would only engage the player a few units at a time. Halo 4 would reintroduce and prominently feature the Prometheans, and the Neil Blomkamp film District 9 would repurpose aspects of both the Halo movie and Chronicles plot, including, most notably, the main character's gradual transformation into an alien. Wingnut Interactive had failed to bring its Halo experience to fruition, but it wouldn't be the only non-Bungie studio to do so. While the two developers were busy with their episodic experiment, the Microsoft-owned Ensemble Studios was working on two Halo projects of its own. The first was the real-time strategy game Halo Wars for the Xbox 360, which had started out development in 2004 as a new sci-fi property codenamed Phoenix, before Ensemble was urged by Microsoft to turn it into a Halo-themed one. The second was a massively multiplayer online game for the PC codenamed Titan, which also began its life as an original concept before being given the Halo name and universe to work with. Unlike Wars, however, the decision to make the MMO about Halo had never actually been officially approved by Microsoft. As explained in Jason Schreier's 2017 book Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, by the mid-2000s, many members of Ensemble's older staff wanted to move on and do something new. The team was excited about the prospects of Halo Wars, but it was yet another real-time strategy game after years of working almost exclusively on the Age of Empires series. Their MMO would be their big break, an exciting chance to develop something mechanically different and carve an original identity for themselves. And so, the decision was made internally to make it about Halo, an internationally beloved property that the team already had experience working with, so as to try and cook its chances of being properly greenlit. In an interview with Ink Gamers in 2010, Ensemble Studios' Dusty Monk would reveal that the game would have utilized ideas and mechanics that several future MMOs would later incorporate, such as a cover system similar to the one in The Old Republic, and public quests that any players in a specific area could participate in, like those of Warhammer Online. Internally, many within Ensemble expected that the MMO was going to be huge, so much so that work began on a brand new campus that would support the game's development and maintenance post-release. Sadly, it wasn't to be. Sometime during 2007, the axe came down and the MMO was canceled. Dusty Monk would claim that the decision was made as a result of a new guard at Microsoft coming along that was incensed by the success of the Nintendo Wii, and wanted its Xbox platform to go more in the direction of appealing to a more casual, broader audience. A MMO which would be both very expensive and appeal to a smaller niche of potential players was simply no longer viable. Jason Schreier's book would further elaborate on the circumstances in which Titan was canceled, explaining that Halo Wars had also been chronically understaffed for years at this point, and desperately needed all hands on deck at Ensemble in order for it to be completed as it entered the final throes of its development. This, combined with Microsoft's increasing lack of interest in the PC at the time as a result of the Xbox 360's success, left Ensemble with little room to haggle for the continued existence of their big pet project.
This is Halo DS, and you're going to see some better videos on my blog. And you've got basically a multi-card play, single card play and a model viewer. We're going to do multi-card play, and I'm going to host the game here with Boson. And you can see this is basically just a multiplayer mode right now.
At the same time that the Halo MMO was reaching the end of its troubled life, rumors of a much different and much smaller Halo game were beginning to take hold online. A Halo game for the Nintendo DS. The idea of Microsoft letting any one of its franchises, let alone Halo, appear on Nintendo's handheld platforms is a hard pill to swallow. Yet at the time, it was not without precedence. Because Microsoft lacked a portable console of its own, and thus was not competing with the rest of the industry in this field, the company didn't take issue with releasing its properties on its competitors' handheld devices. As a result, rumors of a portable Halo experience thrived for years. But concrete evidence of such a project would remain largely elusive until January of 2007, when IGN's former Nintendo editor-in-chief, Matt Casamassina, claimed on his blog that he had played a canceled Halo game for the DS. Describing the title as Metroid Prime Hunters with a Halo facelift, Matt claimed that it played remarkably well, but declined to detail who had developed it and why exactly it had been canned, other than that there were many egos involved in its development. Matt's blog post would ignite a swath of incredulous reactions from IGN's online community and beyond, with many commenters claiming that Matt was lying. Amidst the bustle of the internet, Halo's stewards would actually validate Matt's claims, with Bungie's Brian Gerard and Frank O'Connor telling Siliconera at 2007's E3 that several Halo projects for the DS had been unsuccessfully pitched to them over the years, and that the game Casamassina was referring to was likely one of said pitches. But many remained skeptical. Finally, after close to a year, Casamassina would attempt to quell people's disbelief in October by showing Halo DS live in a video alongside IGN's Mark Boson. In both the live video and additional gameplay footage that the editors would release shortly after, the two showcased what indeed appeared to be a Halo game built for the DS, demonstrating an ad hoc multiplayer match between the two in a lo-fi rendition of Halo 2's Zanzibar map. Similar to other first-person shooters on the DS, the top screen provided a clean view of the game's first-person action, while the bottom screen displayed health, ammunition, and other minutiae, and served to control the game's camera. Matt and Mark would bookend the video by stating that while the prototype they were playing was well over a year old, it was still fun to play, and that they hoped its creator, a major unnamed studio, would get another chance to prove themselves with the Halo license in the future. As with his January blog post, some commenters would cry foul, claiming that Matt had fabricated the demo. Despite Bungie's Brian Gerard confirming to Kotaku shortly after that the game demonstrated was in fact a real unsolicited pitch they had received. Regardless, many would note following the video's publication that the pitch possessed several visual similarities to GoldenEye Rogue Agent for the DS, leading to a persistent theory that it was created using the James Bond game's engine and assets. It is unknown whether N-Space or EA Tiburon, which co-developed Rogue Agent, were also responsible for the Halo pitch, although this theory admittedly doesn't lend itself to many other possibilities.
Where did it go? I lost it! Hey, wait a minute!
What is known is that years later, N-Space would end up developing another, vastly different Halo game for the greater part of 2013. Revealed in early 2017 through gaming archivist Andrew Borman's YouTube channel P2P Online, the game, codenamed Haggar, would have melded the worlds of Halo and Mega Bloks together into a kid-friendly platforming game for the Xbox 360. The player would have assumed the role of a blocky Spartan on a quest to exterminate the forces of the Covenant using familiar weaponry and vehicles, such as plasma rifles, energy shields, warthogs, and ghosts to smash their opponents into bricks. Players would have also been able to construct heavy ordnances, such as turrets, using bricks collected in the game's environment to gain an upper hand over their enemies, and use blueprints to create large structures that would allow them to proceed through stopgaps in each level. Similar to Traveler's Tales Lego games, Haggar would have featured plenty of slapstick comedy moments, as well as a two-player cooperative multiplayer mode. And finally, the package would have been rounded off with Besieged mode, a tower defense mode in which players would have had to build up their base and defend it from increasingly aggressive waves of enemies. Haggar's existence would receive a strong positive reaction from the Halo community, prompting 343 Industries' Bonnie Ross to publicly comment on it, confirming its legitimacy and stating that it had a lot of fun ideas and invention behind it, but ultimately didn't progress beyond what it managed to leak. While she did not provide much insight into why Haggar fell apart, it's reasonable to assume, as Andrew Borman does in his reveal video of it, that the game was likely hurt at least in part by Microsoft transitioning resources from the Xbox 360 to the Xbox One in 2013. Nonetheless, Brian Gerard would state a week later that given the game's strong reception, it's not impossible that another Halo experience in the style of Haggar may launch in the future. The latest publicly known Halo project to be canceled would be Halo Online, a free-to-play Halo game announced in March of 2015 to be coming exclusively to the PC in Russia. Developed by Saber Interactive and published by the Moscow-based Innova Systems, Online would have functioned similarly to Activision's China-exclusive Call of Duty Online, allowing gamers to duke it out in a microtransaction-charged adaptation of the series' iconic multiplayer suite. While not possessing a single-player campaign, Online would have taken place within the series' canon, occurring shortly after the events of Halo 3 on Anvil, a secretive UNSC space station where Spartan warriors train together to sharpen their skills and test experimental technology. The game would have been optimized to run smoothly across both high-end and low-end computers, and, as a result of being powered by a heavily modified version of Halo 3's engine, would feature many of Halo 3's maps at launch, along with a few original maps of its own. After cycling through both a closed alpha and beta throughout the better part of 2015, Innova Systems would announce that they were suspending the game's testing as a result of having encountered serious problems during its development. This announcement would be immediately followed by the release of a glossy new story trailer, suggesting that issues aside, Online was still on track to properly release. Unfortunately, it was not to be. After over half a year of inactivity, Innova Systems would announce in August of 2016 that Online had been canceled, claiming that further development on the game had been stinted by Microsoft failing to make decisions on the future of the project. Despite being shuttered, the international Halo community would do their best to keep Online alive, modding the game into an expanded, microtransaction-free multiplayer experience called El Dorito. The mod would enjoy a positive reception among Halo fans before Microsoft eventually stepped in and forced El Dorito's creators to cease its production in April of 2018. As significant as each of these projects may seem, they only represent a few of what is surely countless undertakings in the world of Halo that never got off the ground. And as the Halo series attempts to carve a new identity for itself with Halo Infinite, they'll undoubtedly be joined by countless more. Like Master Chief himself, the Halo universe follows a stylized set of codes and conventions, yet is still malleable enough that many different characteristics can be projected onto it. As long as it remains that way, many developers will continue to plug away at novel experiences that range widely in style and tone. Experiences that hopefully will avoid the fates of many more before them and see the light of day. Our documentaries are crowdfunded and made possible by the generous supporters backing us on Patreon. If you enjoy our content, consider subscribing to our channel and becoming a patron to help us create more. Thank you.